I did this on my land, so the process of doing it on my land, I've learned, and that's, that land is basically the same as my land is up in that area also. It's not connected to it, has nothing to do with it, but it's the same, you know, type of land, type of trees, type of forest. And I believe this is something that should be done, just for the benefit of the forest. Obviously, there is a financial reward to this for the town also. And one of the things is, when he asked the motivation, I think the motivation is two things: to improve the forest first, and obviously, while improving the forest, we're going to have a renewable, sustainable income for the town. So there's a dual purpose there. Let's see. As far as the cost goes, the estimated figure there, you remember our estimated, because until he goes out and actually marks it, he does, on a forest program, what they do is they go and they mark every tree, and they mark it at the DBX, which is the diameter breast height, visual mark, and then they also mark at the base of the stump, so that every tree that's cut, when you're in the process of cutting, you walk through there, and if there is a stump that has no mark on it, then that tree was not supposed to be cut. So you know that the loggers, and they're pretty honest, they're pretty good, because they are, John, when he did mine, he went through, and I went through, and you check them, so you know that they're not taking more than they're supposed to take. So you really have an accurate account. And as far as the resources, now is the time to harvest a lot of these trees, because they're getting to the point where they get, like the pine trees will get hot rot. The center of the tree starts to rot out, you don't know it, it doesn't show it, because the outside is the only part that's living, and the tree looks fine and healthy, but the next thing you know, the tree goes over because it's all rotted on the inside. So now is the time to harvest these. They've got to just about their maximum maturity in some areas. The other thing to point out too, is this is a selective cutting. You're not gonna, although there is a possibility you might go in there and you might clear cut a small area. Working with the school committee, and I like the reason we're doing this is we like to see that whole parcel done almost like as one parcel. Each section would be divided out so that the town land, whatever the income, and this is something I talked to Mr. Belaconis with, and it's something you people in the legal council have to decide, who gets the money and where does it go from which piece of land. I don't really have any idea on that. But each section would be individually marked, so you know that the school land generated X number of dollars. The town land, the general government land generated X number of dollars, and the conservation the same thing. But the school has expressed an interest in working with us, working with the forester, and using it on an educational purpose, as far as marking what we have now, what we're doing, and keeping records as to, you know, how the trees, I'm sure, you know, how they, in the areas that are cut, how much improvement has been in that stand as opposed to an area that we didn't cut. As far as the fire roads go, the fire roads have not been taken care of for a number of years. So they basically, they've grown in where to get the trucks in now is difficult. They should be cut over. Plenty of walking paths, but these were roads that you could drive a fire truck in. They weren't paved or anything. Obviously, they were just dirt roads, but they were, you know, they were in pretty good shape, and you could drive a fire truck down in there. Now you can't. They had a fire up there last summer. They couldn't get the fire truck in an area that there was an access road, but the access road wasn't accessible because of the growth that had gone in over it. I think the last time we cut was in basically in the 80s. The other thing is, John had agreed that he would, what we'd like to do is, if we mark these trees, is to mark some trees that are only good for firewood. The only forestry committee, the only thing we're interested in is basically the trees for firewood. So he would mark with a different color paint trees that he felt that should be removed, or we felt it should be removed, because they're interfering. They might be a large oak tree that's got a large crown, and it's blocking the sunlight, so there's nothing growing in for a big area, and that's, you know, it's called a wolf tree. That should be removed. So we might mark that and leave it, because it's not a I've had my land done twice, and it's been, I think, 17 or 18 years I've been in the program. And I've noticed a big difference on the land. I had a cutting done last spring, and they were able to get in because I had, in the previous cutting, developed fire roads, so there was good access. They didn't have to make access. The access was actually already there, so they were able to get in and do it in the spring as opposed to the winter. I don't think we're gonna be able to do any firewood cutting this year. I'm not even sure of the total process. I've talked to Mr. Delaconis about it. We have to put advertisements in the paper for people to sign up for when they can cut, what they have for equipment, whether they have a four-wheel drive pickup, or whether they have a trailer, or whether they just have a car, and all that has to be taken into account. We have to decide where we're gonna do it, who's gonna be there with them. They have to be supervised. This is what I'm hoping we can get the school involved with, as far as the students, you know, being active in that part of it, but I don't think, I just don't think we can do any of that this year. I do think, I would like to see if the school committee and the conservation have already said they wanna go forward with the programs. We're waiting to see if you wanna go forward, because it's gonna make it better all the way around if we do the whole parcel at once. And the school has already told me they will, in order to get the town land, you have to go through school land. And that's the area that would be best for a landing area, and they've agreed that's fine with them. They don't have a problem with that. They're willing to, you know, to work with everybody. So that's what we're trying to do right now. I think that if, and my understanding is the conservation and the school has already agreed they want John to go and do the marking. Now, after the marking is done, then you come back and you have a more accurate figure as to what the value would be. The next step, obviously, is to go out on bids. Then once you get the bid, you know exactly what it is, depending on what the bids are. So you'll know exactly what the value is and what you're gonna get out of it. Until all of that is done, you really don't know. It's estimated. And the market does change. I mean, it's, right now, I think the market is up for everything. For pine, oak, they're using the wood for biofuels, they're using it for cordwood, for lumber. I mean, it's a good market right now. I think there's a possibility we might get some good business, and we might be able to do it this season, but I'm not too sure. But obviously, it would be beneficial to everybody if we do all three of them together. So I'm highly in favor of it. I think it's a good plan. I've gone through it, like I said, myself. The school went through it, conservation went through it, and they've agreed. I think it's something that we should go forward with. I'm kind of hoping somebody from the school will be here tonight, because I'd like to firm up some way of making sure that their education-wise is gonna be involved in marking and, you know, measuring, so on and so forth, which I think they will, because they seem very excited about it.
Right, thank you, Dana. Has town council reviewed this plan?
Not the plan. Council is involved in the issue that Mr. Rowe mentioned about if we have three different town agencies that each have custody of town land, how we would put it together and where those dollars would go. Because it makes no sense to have three separate organizations doing three separate bids. I think, as Mr. Robbins mentioned, the value would be to do it all and aggregate it into a single proposal. Not reviewed the details that are here.
And what are the implications of signing this plan this evening?
Well, I think Mr. Rowe and I sat down and we went through the checklist that appears on page 4 and the purple sheet that was in your packet. And that was some recommendations on landowner goals. I realized that when this photocopy came out, those check marks did not necessarily translate through, but we do have some recommendations in terms of importance, and I would want to defer that entire recommendation to the Forestry Committee, so the committee could review that information and come up with a consensus. But those are just our preliminary recommendations.
Then the next question I want to ask is, has the Forest Committee, I know we're just making appointments, formally met?
No, since the appointment was made, no.
No, they have not. No. So they have not, as a committee, reviewed this for
I
recommendation.
think it would be important to hear their recommendation, their formal recommendation.
I do too.
One other thing too is, I think it was mentioned earlier, I think on the permits, send this to the state, but I don't think you need state approval. This generally is designed for a chapter 61 program, which is the landowners get a reduction in their taxes on the forestry plan. And in order for you to get that, it has to be approved by the state. This situation is not getting any tax reductions because you own the land. So I don't necessarily think all of the state requirements
Have to be met.
have to be met.
We can find that out. Do you know when the forestry committee plans on meeting? Has anything been set up, Dana? No?
Like I say, myself and Scott were just appointed, so I've talked to, through this process, I've talked to Steve 2 or 3 times on the phone. But I don't know, I'm not too sure at this point whether he's, by virtue of being on there, is the chairman, is responsible to call for a meeting. I really don't, I'm not too sure.
Well, somebody's got to call for a meeting and then
Someone
elect
should just do
officers.
it.
Right.
Well,
Who's the liaison here?
Joe.
Joe? Joe's not here this evening. I could ask him to follow up and get it moving.
Yeah.
Contact the members and call the first meeting, and then after that, committee's on their own.
I think it's wise. Conceptually, I tend to embrace the idea, the whole idea. And I do recall back in the 80s, we did have a more active forest committee.
I don't think there was any commercial cutting back then.
No.
no, we've never had any.
Yeah, it was just,
Just the firewood.
Right. But, at least we had some sort of a program going there. And some
yeah,
active
it was at a
involvement.
time when the energy had skyrocketed, and people
Well,
were...
I know one of the things that we did have, and I haven't been able, we tried checking it and running it down, but we did have some equipment, and one of the things that I talked to the school and conservation, and they both seemed willing to. I mentioned it would be nice if the forestry committee could get some of this money back to buy, maybe a chainsaw and some pole pruners and, pole saws, things like that. If we have the scout troop up there that wanna do a, for a merit badge or something, clearing a fire road, doing things like that, we had some of the equipment available. So like I say, I haven't talked to the other members, but I did mention it would be nice if we had somebody back from equipment for that.
Are you suggesting we table this until we get a recommendation?
Yeah, until we get a recommendation from the forest committee. But again, I want to send it on its way with a
With a positive...
positive feedback. I think it's a good idea and a good program to get going again, or get going to begin with. And, and the idea of commercial cutting is pretty good. My major concern, aside from, taking care of the forest, is the impact on the neighborhood, getting up into that area. We're talking, you said it could take as much as a couple of months for a commercial cut.
Yeah, probably would for that, if the whole thing was done, 60 acres, yeah, probably would,
So I would just like to see that handled appropriately with adequate notification to people and some feedback before it actually occurs,
Well, maybe what we should do is allow the Forest Committee to meet, generate their recommendations, and bring it back to the board, and we'll schedule a public hearing, and that would allow the neighbors and people in the area to come before us.
I have no idea what the size of the, all I know, logging trucks is when I, went up to Maine, and I saw logging trucks and had to get out of their way, I don't know if that's what we're talking about here, but it's,
yeah, there's some
Pretty large.
sizable equipment involved, and, there's definitely